Hello students, welcome back. In this video lecture, we are going to talk about diabetes mellitus. So first, let's talk about diabetes, its classification and diagnosis. And then in the second part, we'll jump to the treatment. So diabetes mellitus is the capital of world is India. In India, you see diabetes is the capital of the world. So the death in diabetes is because of the silent MI or heart attack. You must have heard of a, old age man with no problem, and all of a sudden, when the man was brought to hospital, he was brought dead. So what happened? This was a case of patient of diabetes mellitus, uncontrolled diabetes. Because of the cardiovascular issue, the patient died because of the old age, because of the diabetes. There was the cardiovascular mortality is there in the diabetes patient. And also you must have heard in the COVID times that all the persons who had diabetes are actually at the high risk of mortality. So diabetes patient are actually high risk of mortality, if beat it as COVID, if beat it as the cardiovascular problems. Diabetes, because it is the sugar level, the spike in the sugar level of the in the blood is because of the reason that there is so many complication occurs because of the diabetes. So what is the leading cause of death? What causes death in the patient of diabetes is the cardiovascular problem. The silent MI that occurs in these patients, the silent heart attack. Normally, if an individual, there is a heart attack, the patient will have chest pain, lot of sweating, and, everyone will come to know that patient is having heart attack. If you have seen in the movies or something, the one hand is on the chest and there is a stabbing pain in the chest. And, because of the typical features, if there is shoulder pain, we will tell that patient is having MI. But what if the patient dies without any symptom? Old age, geriatric patient, and the patient is a known diabetic patient. In that case, because of the silent MI, patient can be dead. So what is the leading cause of death? In patient of diabetes, it is going to be the silent MI, the cardiovascular mortality. What is the drug that can be given to lower this mortality? We do not want that old age people with diabetes die with a cardiovascular problem. We do not want this to happen. So what is the drug that we give to prevent that? See, we have to give anti-diabetic drug to the patient, definitely to lower down the sugar. But because the cardiovascular mortality is high in these patients, that is why we have to give a drug that is GLP-1 receptor agonist. According to American Diabetes Association, the best answer of the patient with high cardiovascular mortality is going to be GLP-1 receptor agonist. If this GLP-1 receptor agonist, see, what is the best answer? It is going to be semaglutide. Semaglutide is GLP-1 receptor agonist. But this drug is very expensive. It is not given in the option in question. Or suppose if in clinical scenario, if the patient cannot afford this drug, then the second best choice that you can give to these patients is SGLT2 inhibitor. That is empagliflozin. Empagliflozin is the one that you can give to these patients, that is SGLT2 inhibitor. So if in exam they ask you what is the drug that you can give to reduce the cardiovascular mortality in a diabetic patient, then you have to go for SGLP-1 receptor agonist, that is a semaglutide. If this is not given in the option, then you have to go for SGLT2 inhibitor. Now coming to the most common subtype of diabetes, it is going to be type 2 diabetes mellitus. The most common subtype of diabetes, if you have seen any obese patient, adult age diabetes, nowadays, because of fast food, because of lack of exercise, because so many factors are there, and we can see that so many adult people are getting diabetes nowadays, and they are on metformin, oral hypoglycemic drugs, if you have seen all of these patients. So this is type 2 diabetes, wherein, very fat patient, 30-35 age group, and they are taking oral hypoglycemic drug, mostly metformin that we give, and they're taking metformin. This is type 2 diabetes. What is the factor that is causing diabetes in these young patients? If a patient comes to you in OPD and tell that my father was not diabetic, nobody was diabetic in my family, and he's little overweight. Say BMI of this patient is 27 or 28, and patient tells that I don't smoke or drink. How come I am diabetic? So what is the cause that can lead to the type 2 diabetes in these patients? The most correct answer is going to be the polygenetic inheritance. What is polygenetic inheritance? Is that it does not follow the Mendelian law. Means if grandfather had diabetic, the children or the grandchildren will not have diabetes. So Mendelian means from one generation, it is not passed on to another generation, that it does not follow the Mendelian law. If I say something follows the Mendelian law, means it is passed on to generation. But here I am saying that the type 2 diabetes mellitus is because of polygenetic, and polygenetic inheritance does not follow the Mendelian law, means if the father is having, then children may not have it. So what is the cause? Other reason for this type 2 diabetes is multifactorial reasons, because of obesity, central fetal obesity, we can say. Other factors, environmental factors that can lead to type 2 diabetes in the patients. Insulin resistance is there finding in these patients. And according to American Diabetes Association 2023 guidelines, screening for Asian or Indian population should start at 35 years of age group. In Harrison, it is given that 45 years of age group we start. If the patient is more than or equal to 45 years of age, then we do the screening for diabetes. But according to American Association guidelines, it says that we should start at 35 years of age group. Now, what if the patient is having ASCVD risk? Means if the patient has already established a cardiovascular disease. Suppose if I say patient had myocardial infarction or a stroke, or if the patient had stent, or if the patient had any coronary artery bypass grafting. So these patients have increased risk of having MI. In these patients, there is high cardiovascular mortality, and for these patients, we give medication that is GLP-1 receptor agonist. This is the drug of choice that we give for these patients who have high risk of having MI. According to American Association guidelines 2023, they says that we give a drug that is GLP-1 receptor agonist. And what is the drug under this category? It is semaglutide. Semaglutide is given to these patients. Now, what are the tests that we can do to measure the insulin resistance? Because see, for type 2 diabetes, we need to see if insulin resistance is there or not. So for this sake, we have indices to check. HOMA-IR is hemostasis model assessment insulin resistance. This is one index. Another index is QICI, which is quantitative insulin sensitivity check index, and another one is Mitsuda index. So these are the indices which you can use to measure the insulin resistance. You just need to know the names of these indices. Now, if you see, this is a patient with acanthosis nigricans. It is a hyperpigmentation seen in the dorsum of the neck or seen in axilla, and it is related to type 2 diabetes mellitus patient or PCOD patient, right? We have seen most commonly patients with acanthosis nigricans. It is a cutaneous indicator for having insulin resistance. We know if a person is having acanthosis nigricans, in the neckline, crease line, there is hyperpigmentation. And we say if a person is having a lot of skin tags, that is also indicator for insulin resistance. If you have seen obese patient and they're wearing very heavy gold chains, and close to that gold chain in the neckline, in the creases, you can see a lot of skin tags. So that is also indicator for insulin resistance. And acanthosis nigricans is also a very good indicator for insulin resistance. Also related to centripetal obesity. And if it is not given, if type 2 diabetes mellitus is not given, PCOD is not given, then you can also mark metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome will also have acanthosis nigricans if it is not insulin resistance. If acanthosis nigricans is not related to insulin resistance, it can also be seen in carcinoma of pancreas or colon. So in carcinoma of pancreas or colon, you can also see acanthosis nigricans. Now let's see the classical symptoms of diabetes mellitus. Polyuria, polydipsia, weight loss. These are the 3 classical symptoms of diabetes mellitus. Patient will go to washroom a lot of times. Patient will drink a lot of water. And there will be weight loss even though patient is eating a lot. So these are the 3 classical symptoms of diabetes. Going to pee a lot, going to drink water a lot, and there is a weight loss. So polyuria means patient will urine more than normal. What is the normal urine that you pass? It is 1 ml per kg per hour. in 1 hour per kg of individual. So suppose if a person is having 60 kg adult patient, then in that scenario 60 ml of urine per hour patient passes. In 24 hour, how much it will be? And then 16 to 24, it will be 1500 ml. So 1.5 liters of urine a person passes daily normally. In case of patient with diabetes, the urine output of that patient will be more than 3 liters a day. So patient will go to washroom a lot of times, especially in the night times. Polydipsia. Polydipsia means the patient will have increased thirst. Patient will drink a lot of water. Normally a person will take 4 to 5 liters of water intake, but here the patient will have a lot of water intake. Even though patient is having polyphagia, patient will have increased hunger, but after that also patient, despite of increased hunger, patient will have weight loss. That is because of the catabolism. So the three classical symptoms of diabetes mellitus is polyuria, polydipsia, weight loss. If in option polyphagia is given, polyphagia is the patient will have more hunger. Patient will never feel satiety. So polyphagia is not a classical symptom as polyphagia is not measurable. Diet varies from person to person and you cannot measure diet for an individual. So that is why polyphagia is not a classical symptom because it is not quantified. You cannot measure the hunger of the patient. That is why this is not a classical symptom. Though it is a symptom, but it is not a classical symptom. So what are the classical symptoms? There are three classical symptoms: polyuria, increased urine output; polydipsia, increased water intake; and third one is weight loss. Apart from that, patient will have polyphagia, patient may have UTI infection, and female patient generally complain of mycotic genital infection, for example, recurrent vulvovaginitis. Sometimes patient can be asymptomatic also, like in routine OPD, in routine checkup, you have asked for the blood sugar level and you find that the patient is having diabetes. But patient will tell you, I had no symptoms. So patient may be asymptomatic sometimes, and in routine checkup and routine examination, you find the patient is having diabetes. So sometimes the patient are also asymptomatic. For the diagnosis, we do the fasting glucose of the patient. What is fasting glucose? 8 hours fasting we ask the patient. That means minimum patient should have a fasting of 8 hours. When you draw the sample, before that, at least 8 hours patient should not eat or drink. So 8 hours, we have now two scenarios. Either it is a blood fasting or it is a plasma fasting. Which is better, blood or plasma? You must be thinking, ma'am, blood fasting only we take. No, actually the correct answer is plasma fasting. So blood will have RBCs also, and if processing takes some time, then the RBC will consume that glucose and therefore the value can be falsely low. Value will become low, but it is a false reading. So always go for a plasma fasting glucose. The correct answer is plasma fasting glucose because plasma has no RBC and you get the correct value. What is the value that you get? Value, now if we have to draw the table for fasting plasma glucose, what is the normal value? It is less than 100. Always in Indian, we measure in milligram per deciliter, mg per deciliter. So for the normal scenario, the plasma fasting should come less than 100. For pre-diabetic patient, this fasting plasma glucose is between 100 to 125 milligram per deciliter. And for diabetes patient, when do we declare the patient as diabetic? When the fasting plasma is more than or equal to 126 milligram per deciliter. Very, very, very important. How are you going to diagnose diabetes in a patient? When the plasma fasting glucose level is more than or equal to 126 milligram per deciliter. Another way you can measure or diagnose the diabetes in patient is doing OGTT test. You must have heard of this OGTT test, which is also known as 2-hour plasma glucose test. 2-hour plasma glucose. See, here also we are taking plasma glucose. In this 2-hour plasma glucose, as the name suggests, means we are taking glucose 2 hours and after 2 hours we are doing the test. So in this OGTT test or 2-hour plasma glucose test, we ask the patient to consume 75 grams of glucose. We have some glucose pouches or sachets coming as 75 gram pre-weigh. We ask the patient to consume that. Glucon-D or like that 75 grams is there. So, and we ask the patient to consume it, and after that, after 2 hours, we do the sampling in the patient. We ask the patient not to do walking or anything, just sit, relax, and you can use mobiles. Nowadays, we have social media, so people can scroll on social media. Basically, we ask the patient not to do any kind of exercise or not to walk or try to sit idle. Matlab, like, don't consume your energy for rest of the thing, so that we can actually calculate the glucose levels in your blood. So sample is taken. Now for OGTT or for 2 hours plasma glucose, normal value is when it is less than 140. For pre-diabetic, it is a 140 to 199. And when do we say the patient is diabetic? When the values of OGTT is more than 200 or 2 hour plasma glucose. Now remember this thing, that the postprandial value, PP value is not OGTT value. In postprandial, we ask the patient to give sample after 2 hours of any meal. Suppose if a person had any meal and after 2 hours, you recall the patient and then patient give the sample. So postprandial is actually different from 2-hour plasma glucose. I'll tell you why. A person comes to you and you ask the patient to give to have normal breakfast, and after you ask the patient to give fasting blood, and patient will tell that I have already had my meal, and can you do the testing? You have two options. Either you do the random blood sugar or you can do the postprandial. Now, and it's been more than 1 hour, 1.5 hours, and you say that only 15 minutes left to 2 hours after breakfast. And you'll be like, you give sample after 15 minutes. That is postprandial. Sometimes you ask the patient, have breakfast and come. Consciously patient will only have very little breakfast or may not have proper breakfast. So in that case, the postprandial value is not proper because the patient had no routine meal, and the quantification of the meal person has taken is also different. Suppose if a person eats sweet in the breakfast, suppose if a person is not eating sweets in the breakfast, so the glucose value varies according to this. So therefore, the postprandial, the PP value, after meal, if you take after 2 hours of meal intake, if you do the testing, that is postprandial. Postprandial is not used for diagnosis. Remember this thing. They confuse you in exam postprandial. Instead of OGTT, don't get confused with postprandial. Postprandial is after meal. PP is after meal. PP after meal. But OGTT or 2-hour fast or 2-hour plasma glucose is 75 gram of glucose. After that, 2 hours. After 2 hours, you take the sample. That is OGTT. Postprandial is not used for diagnosis. It is used only for follow-up or monitoring of diabetes. It is not used for diagnosis. First time when you are diagnosing a patient with the diabetes, we do not use postprandial. But if for follow-up, for routine checkup, for the monitoring, you can use postprandial, but not for diagnosis. So if you must have heard of something known as impaired fasting glucose. If a person was about to get selected in army or in the police recruitment, and you have written in the medical that there is impaired fasting glucose, and the person is not selected. Now the person will come to you and tell that what was it? What is impaired? What is IFG, which is impaired fasting glucose? You will tell that we did fasting glucose on your body and the glucose level were on a higher side. Now, but based on that, the person will ask you that you have to do another test because I've worked so hard for this recruitment and I should be get selected. Then the second test you can do is 2-hour plasma glucose. Then you do the plasma glucose. See, it is indicating towards pre-diabetic. So the doctor will unfit that person for the recruitment. But that person is grabbing the doctor's collar and telling that, no, I have worked so hard for this recruitment, you have to find another way. Then you do another test, which is 2 hours plasma glucose test, which is also known as OGTT test. In OGTT test also, the value comes between 140 to 199. So this is, you're writing another thing, that is impaired glucose tolerance. This glucose tolerance is also impaired in this patient. Now you can tell the patient is pre-diabetic patient. So you do the another testing. So remember, postprandial value is not used for diagnosis of diabetes. It can be used for monitoring purposes. The random blood sugar can be used for diagnosis, but not the postprandial. So if you see for asymptomatic, we'll talk about HbA1c in some time, and this we have already covered. If the patient is asymptomatic, fasting plasma glucose, if it comes more than 126 milligram per deciliter, then we say the patient is diabetic. Or if according to US guidelines, in Indian, if you see Indian report, it will come as milligram per deciliter. If you see US reports or in exam to confuse you, they can give in millimole per liter also. If it is more than 7 millimole per liter, then we say it is diabetic. For OGTT test, oral glucose tolerance test, that is 2-hour plasma glucose, and that is after 75 gram of taking glucose, you do 2 hours of, after 2 hours you do the testing. If it come more than 200 mg per deciliter, we say the person is diabetic. And according to US or in millimoles, you can say if it is more than 11.1 millimole per liter. Now coming to the types of diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is the one in which the diabetes is detected in very early age group. A child is having diabetic, and you must have seen child taking insulin shots. So that is type 1 diabetes mellitus. A middle age group, obese, having diabetes, that is type 2 diabetes. But in between this type 1 and type 2, we also have type 1.5 diabetes mellitus. But before doing type 1.5, let's study type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is the pediatric onset. If you see diabetes in a children, because of the autoimmune destruction, because there is beta cell destruction, this beta cell is destructed, and because of autoimmunity, there is anti-islet cells antibody, and this causes decrease in the insulin level in the patient. That is going to cause insulinopenia, and this is causing the diabetes in the patient. Stage 1, stage 2 of type 1 are asymptomatic, but from stage 3, the symptoms start. Patient will have symptomatic dysglycemia, means sugar will also be high and symptoms will also be seen. So type 1 diabetes seen in children because of autoimmune destruction. Type 2 diabetes is the one which is seen in obese patient and middle age group, 30-35 age group. We can see this kind of insulin resistance. See, type 1 is because of the destruction of the beta cells. But type 2 is not because of the destruction of beta cells, it is because of the resistance to insulin. So in this case, the RIA, radio immune insulin levels, are going to be increased. What is the most common cause of type 2 diabetes? We have already discussed this. It is polygenetic inheritance and followed by multifactorial. So the best answer is going to be polygenetic inheritance, multifactorial, followed by multifactorial. We also have something known as 1.5 diabetes mellitus, which is also known as LADA, L-A-D-A. LADA stands for latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. As the name suggests, latent autoimmune means it is going to be autoimmune disease, but it is in adults. Earlier in type 1 diabetes, this is autoimmune, but in children. Type 1 diabetes is autoimmune, but in children. And type 1.5 is something that is also autoimmune, but it is seen in adults. So type 1.5 diabetes is adult onset with insulinopenia. The damage to beta cells occurs slowly, and the presentations may be marked in 20 to 30 years of ages. And this is misdiagnosed as type 2. But see, because it is having adult onset, so it may be misdiagnosed as type 2. But in this case, it is autoimmune destruction. There is latent autoimmune diabetes. That is why we call 1.5 as LADA, because it is latent autoimmune diabetes in adults, LADA, type 1.5. We also have a diabetes that is known as MODY, maturity onset dominant in young. So this kind of diabetes, if you have heard a patient saying to you that my grandfather had diabetes, my father had diabetes, my chachaji had diabetes, my tauji had diabetes, all the brothers and sisters of father, my bua is also diabetic patient, and I am also diabetic, my sister is also diabetic, more than 2 generations consecutively. If they are diabetic, 2-3 generations, everyone is diabetic. That case, we say it as MODY, that is maturity onset dominant in young, because it is expressed in every generation. It is passed on from one generation to generation, and they say that everyone in our family are diabetic. It is autosomal dominant pattern of inheritance which is just expressed in every generation. At least 2 consecutive generations have the diabetes. This is the rarest type of diabetes, and this is a diabetes mellitus that follows the Mendelian law. It is passed on from one generation to another generation. Now let's discuss the causes of diabetes. We have already discussed the type 1 diabetes is because of autoimmune destruction. Type 2 diabetes is because of the obesity. There is insulin resistance. There are also another causes to this. For example, if there is damage to any exocrine component of the pancreas, if the exocrine component of the pancreas are damaged, for example, person having cystic fibrosis in which there is 508 mutation, in that case, there will be malabsorption, and that is why the patient will have lack of amylase and lipase, and there will be no starch or sugar absorption, no lipase, no lipid absorption, no fat absorption. And because of that, patient will have diabetes. Or another exocrinopathy can be chronic pancreatitis, a typical alcoholic patient with damage to pancreas. Person is alcoholic patient and person has damaged the pancreas. In that case, the size of the pancreas shrink, the beta cell size shrinks, and this can lead to diabetes in the patient. These are both exocrinopathy. Now coming to endocrinopathy. If a person is having increased level of cortisol, that can also cause increase in the blood sugar level. We have already discussed this in the Cushing syndrome. Blood sugar is increased. If the person is having increased catecholamine, that will also cause increased blood sugar level. If the person is having increased growth hormone, increased catecholamine, all will lead to increase in the blood sugar in body, and that can lead to diabetes in the patient. So acromegaly, wherein there is increase in the growth hormone. Cushing syndrome, whereas there is increase in the cortisol level, that can lead to blood glucose level. Or if the person is having increased catecholamine, epinephrine or non-epinephrine, that can lead to increase in the blood sugar level. Certain drugs can also cause diabetes. For example, if a person is on long-term steroids, that can cause the diabetes in the patient. Or after a kidney transplant, some steroid medication is given to that kidney transplant patient, that can also cause diabetes in the patient. So these are the drugs, immunomodulators, that are given after the kidney transplant, that causes diabetes in the patient. Nowadays, we do not give thiazide as hypertensive medication to the elderly. Why? Because thiazide can actually elevate the HbA1c values, and that is why thiazides are not given in elderly patient as hypertensive. Propranolol. Propranolol is a drug that is used for migraines or for thyroid storms, also increases the blood sugar level or diabetes. Or some antipsychotic are also increases the blood sugar level. How are we going to diagnose diabetes in the patient? We do the fasting plasma sugar in that patient, fasting plasma glucose level. Normally it is less than 100. If it is between 100 to 125, we say it impaired fasting glucose. And if it is more than 126, more than or equal to 126, we call the patient as diabetes mellitus patient. Very, very, very important. You need to have this value by heart. If it is more than 126, the fasting, we call the patient as diabetes patient. If OGTT level 2 our plasma glucose, 75 gram of glucose, we give to the patient, and after 2 hours we take the sample. If the value comes less than 140, we say it is normal glucose level. If the value comes between 140 to 199, then it is impaired glucose tolerance. The patient is pre-diabetic. And if the value come more than 200, we call the patient as diabetes. Remember, you can make diagnosis of diabetes with random blood sugar level if symptoms are present. If symptoms are present. If patient comes to you saying the patient goes a lot of urine in the night times, patient drinks a lot of water, patient is having weight loss, all these are the classical symptoms. If the patient give you these classical symptoms, you do the random blood sugar to this patient. And if you find out the values are increased to more than 200 milligram per deciliter, you can say the patient is a diabetic patient. You can diagnose this patient as diabetic patient. We can diagnose the diabetes with random blood sugar level. Remember, you cannot diagnose a patient diabetic with a postprandial value. Postprandial value is only used for monitoring, not for diagnosis. But random blood sugar level, as the name suggests, random blood sugar means randomly you are taking sample from the patient, despite of the fact patient has eaten, not eaten anything, randomly patient has come to you, you have taken the sample, this is random blood sugar level. If the symptoms are present and you do the random blood sugar, if it come more than 200, we call the patient as diabetic patient. Or if a patient comes to you with hyperglycemic crisis, hyperglycemic crisis means if the patient sugar is more than 60 to 600 to 700, hyperglycemia crisis, lot of blood sugar, and there is hyperosmolar coma, there is because of cerebral edema, the patient is unconscious, comes to you with the hyperosmolar coma, with hyperglycemic crisis, then also you can say the patient is diabetic patient. But what if the patient is asymptomatic? Asymptomatic patient comes to you and tell that NRI patient comes to you and tell that my father was a diabetic patient and now he is no more, and I also want to know if I'm diabetic or not. Can you write a blood sugar for me? Patient is asymptomatic. Then what is the test you are going to do to make the diagnosis as a diabetes or pre-diabetes in this patient? So for that, we do the fasting plasma glucose. If the fasting plasma glucose comes more than 126, we say the patient is diabetic. Then after doing fasting plasma glucose, also you do 2 hours plasma glucose test, that is OGTT test. And if this OGTT test comes also more than 200 milligram per deciliter, then we say the patient is a diabetic patient. But what if a patient is asymptomatic and comes to you and tell that, no, I have a flight to catch tomorrow and I cannot do the blood fasting. I cannot come fasting for tomorrow because tonight I have a flight to catch. So in that case, if the patient cannot do the fasting for diagnosis, you can on the spot write HbA1c test. HbA1c test will tell you blood glucose average level of 2 to 3 months. From past 2 to 3 months, what was the average blood glucose level? That will the HbA1c test will tell. So if the HbA1c value comes less than 5.6, then we give it as normal. If the HbA1c value comes more than or equal to 6.5, then we say it is a diabetes patient. Very important. We always remember this term as diabetes. When do we say the patient is a diabetic patient? When the value comes more than 6.5%. But what is the normal value? It is not less than 6.5. If you inverse it, it becomes 5.6. So the normal value is less than 5.6. For diabetic, it is 6.5, more than or equal to 6.5, and it falls between 5.6 to 6.5, then it is pre-diabetic. But remember one thing, postprandial is not used for diagnosis of diabetes. It is used only for the monitoring. So HbA1c is a glycosylated hemoglobin. This is the best test for diagnosis of diabetes. Why? Because it will tell the diabetes, the sugar level from past 2 to 3 months. So from 8 to 12 weeks, it will tell the average blood sugar that the person had. It is also the investigation of choice for diabetes. It also tells about the severity of diabetes, how severe the diabetes patient is having, or what is the control that a person is taking. If a person is on from 2 years person is taking anti-diabetic medication, then how are you going to see the person is having a controlled diabetes or uncontrolled diabetes? Past 10 years patient is having diabetes. And now the patient thinks that I'm at a high risk after searching on Google and all that, I'm at a high risk of retinopathy. Then how will you tell that what is the control of the patient over diabetes? So if we say the levels are less than 7%, HbA1c level are less than 7%, we say there is a good control of sugar for that patient. Non-diabetic patient, taking medications, taking metformin from past 10 years, how do we say the person is having a good control when the HbA1c level is less than 7%? Already the patient is a diabetic patient. The value will come more than 6.5%. More than or equal to 6.5 means diabetic patient is there. Good control if it is less than 7%. So 4 points that you need to remember related to HbA1c. It is the best diagnostic test. It is the investigation of choice. It tells about the severity of the diabetes, how severe the diabetes is, or it also tells about the long-term control of the diabetes. It is a retrospective study. See, sample is collected, in a test tube, that is a lavender color test tube. And then it will tell about the sugar level for past 2 to 3 months. So it is a retrospective. We are going back in time. So it is a retrospective test that is not affected by the recent food intake, and the estimated average glucose that it tells is 3 months of glucose, that is 8 to 12 weeks. If you see the formula, see if HbA1c value has come, but how will you tell what is the glucose level in the patient? How much is the blood sugar level in the patient? So for that, there is a formula that is 28.7 into HbA1c minus 46.7. So basically, in a simple way, you can remember whatever the HbA1c value comes, you have to multiply it with 21. For example, if a person's HbA1c value comes 8% and the person comes to you and asks, doctor, tell me how much is my sugar level? So how will you tell? Multiply this 8% by 21. So that will become 168 milligram per deciliter. You will tell, despite of eating or non-eating anything, your average blood sugar for 3 months, for the past 3 months was 168. If the person has consumed the meal, it will be more than 168. So it was on a higher side, 8%, right? So it is not a good control. So that is why good control, what is the definition? HbA1c less than 7%. What is the best test for diagnosis of diabetes? It is HbA1c. What is the investigation of choice? It is HbA1c. What tells about the long-term control of diabetes? HbA1c. What tells the severity of diabetes? HbA1c. HbA1c is not used for the diagnosis of bronze diabetes. What is bronze diabetes? Suppose if a person is having beta thalassemia, in that patient, we give packed RBC to the patient. Because we are giving packed RBCs to the patient, patient will have iron level more. This hemochromatosis of secondary variety, this is going to cause the more iron level is going to damage the liver. There is going to be liver cirrhosis in the patient. Also, it will damage the pancreas. There will be damage to the pancreas. So the mass of the beta cells decreases. And because of that, the patient will have type 1 diabetes, insulinopenia. Also, there will be bronzing of the skin. That is why we call it as bronze diabetes in these patients. See, beta thalassemia patient will have the hemoglobin A have got 2 alpha chain, 2 beta chain, right? So there can be defect in any of these. But overall, if you see hemoglobin A, because it is less in the patient, it is defective in the patient. So if you do HbA1c will tell about hemoglobin A, HbA1c. And since the hemoglobin A is defective in the thalassemia patient, so it will give a false reading, a false low reading. That is why HbA1c is not used in case of thalassemia patients. Another test, another retrospective test is serum fructosamine test. This test is also known as glycated albumin. See, HbA1c, which is also known as glycosylated hemoglobin. This is glycosylated, means hemoglobin which is coated with glucose. Glycosylated hemoglobin. But fructose, serum fructosamine is glycated albumin. Here the albumin is coated with the glucose. So albumin, which has got a half-life of 2 to 3 weeks. That is why this test tells about the 2 to 3 weeks sugar of the patient, retrospective. In the past 2 to 3 weeks, what was the level? So it is used for short-term control of diabetes. The test for long-term control is HbA1c. Test for short-term control is serum fructosamine, which is also known as glycated albumin. So average 2 to 3 weeks it tells. Now, what are the risk factor for the screening of diabetes mellitus? I told you, according to ADA, American Diabetes Association, tells that for screening, we have to do if the patient is more than or equal to 35 years. If in the question, if they ask about American Diabetes Association, if they do not mention American Association, then the screening test for diabetes we do for more than or equal to 45 years of age group, according to Harrison 21st edition. Now, what is the age group that is high risk for screening? If a person is having BMI more than 25 years, more than 25. So if BMI is more than 25 means the patient is obese patient. If the patient is physically inactive patient, if there is history of diabetes, if there is history of cardiovascular disease, if the patient is hypertensive patient, if the patient is having high triglycerides, if the patient is having PCOD, acanthosis nigricans, or any sign of insulin resistance. These patients are actually at the high risk population for the screening of diabetes, and we have to do screening for diabetes for these patients. So this is for general population. For impaired glucose tolerance, remember impaired glucose tolerance and impaired glucose fasting we do. These are the tests that pre-diabetes, that tells about the pre-diabetic criteria. For these patients, we do screening diabetic test every yearly. That is on a yearly basis. Or if the HbA1c level comes more than 5.6 and less than 6.5. If it falls between this, then we do the 5.7 to 6.4. If it falls between this, then the patient is pre-diabetic and we do the screening diabetic test on yearly basis. If the patient is gestational diabetic patient during the pregnancy, if there was diabetes, then every 3 years we do the screening test for that population. For general population, we have already discussed, according to Diabetic Association guidelines, it says that more than or equal to 35 years we do the screening test. But according to Harrison 21st edition, we do the screening for more than equal to 45 years for the diabetes patient.